Elena moved silently through the forest, her boots barely making a sound on the damp earth, her eyes scanning every shadow, every movement, as if the trees themselves might betray the presence of someone hidden among them. She could feel the tension in her muscles, the tight coil of anticipation in her chest. She had been tracking signs for days, broken twigs, bent grass footprints fading into the underbrush, and every clue led her deeper into the wilderness, deeper into the unknown where few dared to venture. She adjusted the strap of her pack, feeling the familiar weight of supplies against her back. Her hand brushed the hilt of her knife, as if the metal alone could give her courage. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying scents that teased her senses, the sharp temps of pine, the earthy smell of moss, the faint iron scent that made her pause and inhale. Slowly, every breath a reminder that she was alive, and every sound a possible warning of danger. Her mind raced with scenarios, each one more frightening than the last, imagining the figure she hunted lurking behind a tree, watching her, waiting for a moment to strike. She imagined the eyes in the dark, the way they might glint when they caught the last light of the sun, and her pulse quickened as she tried to steady her thoughts. She had been trained for situations like this, but nothing could prepare her for the gnawing uncertainty. The way the forest seemed to shift around her as if it were alive and conspiring with her target. She could hear a branch snap somewhere to her left and froze her ears, straining to catch the sound of footsteps or a whisper of movement, her heart thundering in her chest. Every second stretched into a lifetime. The forest seemed endless, a maze of shadows and light, of jagged roots and towering trees, and she moved carefully, knowing that one misstep could give away her position. She remembered the warnings from the villagers' tales of someone seen moving at night, someone who was neither fully friend nor fully foe. The stories haunted her mind, yet propelled her forward. She could not ignore the call of curiosity, the need to know what was out there waiting for her. She brushed her fingers over the bark of a tree, feeling the grooves and ridges beneath her fingertips, grounding herself in the physical world as her mind raced with fear and anticipation. The wind shifted, carrying a new scent, smoke faint yet distinct, and she paused, her senses sharpening, her eyes narrowing, her focus trying to determine the direction. It came from the forest, seemed to hold its breath around her, as if it too were waiting for the moment of discovery. Her instincts screamed caution, yet a part of her was drawn forward, pulled by the invisible thread of curiosity, the thought of what she might find both thrilling and terrifying. Her feet moved almost of their own accord, following the scent through narrow passages of ferns and over mossy rocks. Her every sense on alert, her muscles coiled, ready to spring, and she wondered silently if she was about to confront danger or something entirely unexpected. She crouched low, her eyes scanning the damp ground for anything unusual. Every fallen leaf, every twist of the roots, felt significant, as if the forest itself was whispering clues only she could hear. Her boots sank slightly into the soft soil, and she paused to examine a set of footprints that disappeared behind a cluster of ferns. They were human, but not quite ordinary, some prints deeper than expected, while others seemed to glide lightly over the earth, as if whoever had made them was careful and practiced. She traced the trail with her gaze, imagining the person moving ahead, careful, quiet, almost ghost-like. Her pulse quickened, and a chill ran down her spine, not from the cold but from the possibility that she was not alone. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying hints of distant movement, and she tilted her head, trying to catch sounds that might betray a presence somewhere. In the shadows, a branch snapped sharply to her right, and she froze, heart-hammering, eyes darting to the spot. She imagined a figure standing just beyond her vision, waiting to reveal itself, and she tightened her grip on the small knife she always carried for safety. The forest seemed alive with secret energy, every rustle, every bird call, a potential warning, every shadow a potential enemy. Her imagination painted vivid images of someone stalking her back, just as she was stalking them. She crouched again, and leaned closer to the ground, examining broken twigs and flattened patches of moss. The trail was not random. Someone had been moving with purpose, leaving subtle signs that she could interpret if she looked closely enough. She imagined their path through the forest, weaving between the trees, slipping past fallen logs, balancing on rocks, sometimes stopping to glance back as if aware of her pursuit, or perhaps unaware of her entirely. The thought made her pulse race, and a tiny thrill of anticipation curled in her stomach like smoke. Her ears caught the sound of rushing water somewhere in the distance, and she imagined a human crossing a stream, perhaps washing hands or gathering something from the river. The footprints led toward it, and she followed silently, careful not to disturb the delicate undergrowth. Her senses were sharpened to the extreme, every smell, every vibration in the earth telling a story that only she could read. She remembered the stories. She had heard of people lost in these woods of travelers who vanished without a trace, and a cold shiver reminded her that what she was hunting might not be ordinary. At all she paused on a slight rise, looking down at a patch of mud and the prints embedded within it. They were fresher than she had thought. The earth still soft around them, as if whoever had passed had left the memory of their presence. Like a whisper of wind, she crouched closer, imagining the weight of the person moving through the forest, the sound of their breathing, their cautious steps, and the tension in their muscles. Her mind raced, connecting one clue to another, piecing together a story of movement and intent that the forest seemed to hold for her alone. A crow cawed sharply from above, and she flinched, almost laughing at her own jumpiness. Her heart was a wild drumbeat in her chest, and she realized how alone yet intensely connected she felt to the trail ahead. Every broken branch, every footprint, every whispering leaf was a language she understood, and as she took the first careful step forward, she felt the invisible thread pulling her deeper into the unknown, waiting to reveal the truth about the presence she had been hunting. The sun dipped lower behind the thick canopy, casting long, twisting shadows across the forest floor, and she crouched low, watching the darkness stretch and shift with every movement of the leaves. Her eyes darted from one shadow to another, imagining figures lurking just out of sight. Every rustle of the undergrowth felt deliberate, as if someone was watching her as intently as she was watching them. She tightened her grip on her knife, feeling the familiar weight in her hand, a small comfort against the growing unease that curled around her chest like smoke. She moved carefully between the trees, the earth soft beneath her boots, and the smell of wet pine filling her senses. Her mind raced with possibilities, wondering if the person she was tracking could hear her thoughts through some hidden connection. She paused behind a massive oak, peering through the branches, trying to make out shapes that danced on the edge of her vision. Every shadow looked alive, the trunk of one tree like a crouching figure, the curve of a fern like a hand reaching for her. She forced herself to breathe slowly, focusing on each step, making sure not to snap a twig or disturb the delicate balance of the forest. Sudden breeze carried the faint scent of smoke, and she froze, heart hammering in her chest. Could it be a fire, or was it just her imagination playing tricks? Her instincts screamed danger, yet something familiar tugged at the edge of her mind, a memory of warmth and comfort she could not place. She crouched lower, moving silently over roots and fallen branches, every nerve alert, every sense stretched to its limit. The forest was no longer just a place, it had become a living presence, testing her awareness and resolve. Her eyes caught movement ahead, a flicker of something shifting behind a tree, and she held her breath, imagining a human waiting to ambush her. She inched closer each step, careful to remain hidden, her mind painting vivid possibilities of what lay ahead. A branch snapped underfoot, and she flinched, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the quiet woods. She froze, listening, straining to catch the slightest hint of response, yet only the wind answered her, and she realized how alone she truly was, yet also how alive. The shadows grew darker as the sun sank lower, and she felt a thrill mixed with fear coursing through her veins. She moved between trunks, her senses absorbing every detail, the damp moss, the pattern of the leaves, the faint trail of footprints leading deeper into the unknown. She imagined the human she was hunting moving silently among the trees, aware of her pursuit, perhaps enjoying the game, or perhaps unaware of her presence entirely. The thought made her pulse race and a smile ghost across her lips. Despite the tension, every step carried her closer to the source of the strange smoke, scent mingling with the earthy aroma of the forest. She crouched behind a fallen log, peering ahead, and noticed a faint glow flickering like a heartbeat. In the darkness, her curiosity battled with caution, pulling her forward inch by inch. She felt the invisible thread of anticipation tightening around her as she moved closer, every shadow seeming to hold secrets waiting to be revealed, and she wondered if she was prepared for what she would find when the trail finally led her to the truth. She paused in a small clearing, the forest around her alive with whispers of wind and the faint rustle of unseen creatures. Her ears strained for any sound that might hint at movement beyond the trees. Every snap of a twig, every distant bird call, made her heart jump, as if the forest itself was speaking in a language she could barely understand. She crouched low, her body tense and ready, imagining a human moving just out of sight, waiting for her to make a mistake. Faint whistle floated through the air, soft and melodic, almost like a signal meant only for her ears. She froze, the sound carried a calmness that seemed at odds with the tension. She felt, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. Her mind raced, trying to decide if it was a trap or a welcome sign. She crouched behind a thick tree trunk, peering into the shadows, imagining eyes watching her every movement, and she could feel the invisible thread of anticipation tightening in her chest. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath, the leaves suspended in the air, and the usual chatter of insects gone, as if the world itself was waiting for something to happen. She shifted slightly, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of the undergrowth. Her boots brushed against fallen leaves, and she flinched, imagining the sound carrying to the person she was hunting. Her pulse was a drumbeat in her ears, and she realized how close she was to something unknown, something that might change everything. She thought she knew. Sudden rustle to her left made her spin, her eyes scanning the darkness, trying to catch any movement. Her knife felt heavier in her hand, and she gripped it tighter, imagining a figure stepping from the shadows, ready to confront her, or perhaps just observing, waiting to see how she would react. She crouched lower, breathing through her nose, her chest rising and falling in careful rhythm. Her mind raced through every possibility. Who could be out here in the forest, moving with such quiet purpose? And why? The whistle sounded again, this time closer, and she realized it was coming from deeper in the trees. Her curiosity battled with fear, pulling her forward inch by inch. She moved silently over roots and fallen branches, her senses heightened to the extreme. Every sound seemed amplified, every shift of air, every distant call of a bird, a potential clue. She imagined a human crouched behind a tree, just as she was crouched, imagining her every move, and the thought made her stomach tighten. With anticipation, she stopped again, listening to the forest, the air thick with tension and expectation. The whistle faded, leaving only the hum of life around her, and she felt a strange pull drawing her deeper into the unknown. She could sense a presence ahead, something calm and deliberate, and her instincts told her to proceed cautiously, yet her curiosity was impossible to resist. Every step forward felt like entering a story she had not yet read, and every sound around her seemed to whisper secrets waiting to be discovered. The darkness of the forest pressed heavy against her shoulders, as if the trees were closing in on her, and still she moved forward, guided by the faintest shift of light that broke the endless black. The crunch of leaves beneath her boots sounded louder than it should have, and she felt exposed, like every animal in the woods had turned to watch her. The glow was not sudden. It was slow, subtle at first, no more than a soft shimmer that pulsed between the branches like the heartbeat of the night. She blinked once, twice, and wondered if her eyes were playing tricks on her. Maybe it was the moon sliding through clouds, or a reflection off some hidden water. Yet, as she drew closer, the shimmer strengthened. It took shape, a hue warm and alive. Unlike the pale, cold gleam of moonlight, the shadows around her stretched long and thin, as if they were reaching toward the glow and pulling her with them. Her breath came uneven as the image sharpened, until she could no longer deny what she was seeing. A fire, a true fire, kindled in the heart of the woods. The orange flame licked upward, steady and sure, illuminating the clearing in soft pulses. It painted the bark of nearby trees in shades of copper and crimson, and through shifting shapes. Across the forest floor she slowed her pace, her instincts at war within her. Part of her wanted to rush forward and confirm what she saw. The other part urged her to freeze, because fire in the middle of this forest was not natural, not accidental. It meant someone had built it, someone was here, and if someone was here, then perhaps everything she had feared was true. Her body tensed as she reached the edge of the clearing. Every nerve buzzed with anticipation. Her hand hovered near the strap of her pack, and her gaze swept over the lighted space, searching for movement. The fire hissed softly as sap cracked in the wood, a sound so ordinary yet so out of place in her world of pursuit. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, as if the heat from the flames was already burning. The fire was not wild, not reckless. It had been arranged with purpose. Logs stacked carefully, a ring of stones encircling the flame to keep it controlled. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. This was not the careless blaze of a wanderer, but the deliberate work of someone practiced, comfortable and calm. That realization struck her harder than she expected, because she had spent hours imagining a desperate figure fleeing through the woods, cornered, hunted and reckless, and yet the truth sat before her, in a glow of orange and gold that whispered of patience and quiet intention. Her eyes darted around the clearing, seeking the figure who had built it. She thought she saw a shape in the light, a shadow moving slow and deliberate. The anticipation clawed at her stomach. Was this her moment? Was this when the danger revealed itself? She leaned forward ever so slightly, and felt the pull of the fire like a magnet, its warmth promising answers she was not sure she wanted. She stood still at the border of shadow and light, and for a moment her body refused to obey the signal to move forward. The fire crackled steady and calm, its rhythm almost soothing, like the sound of waves pulling back and forth against the shore. And there, within the circle of warm glow, she finally saw him, not a shadow, not a figure of imagination, but a man real and solid. His shoulders curved forward as he crouched low beside the flame. He was stirring a pot that hung above the fire, balanced on a pair of darkened sticks arranged with skill. The movement of his hand was unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. The ladle dipped and rose again, dripping liquid that hissed when it touched the edge of the fire. He adjusted the pot with a small, practiced motion, his face lit briefly by the dancing flame, and then dimmed again as he leaned back into the dark. The sight was so ordinary, and yet so utterly strange, that her mind struggled to accept it. She had prepared herself for confrontation, for a man who might leap from the trees, for words sharp and quick like knives cutting through the night, for the pounding rush of adrenaline that comes when the hunter finally sees the hunted. But this was none of those things. Instead, there was the quiet hum of his voice, low and steady, almost like a tune carried by the wind. He was not hiding, he was not running, he was simply cooking. The smell rolled over her, now stronger than before. It was rich and heavy, something earthy and warm that made her stomach twist in confusion. She had not eaten in hours, maybe longer, and the scent clashed with her fear, leaving her unsteady. It was wrong, she told herself. A man who was dangerous would not sit by a fire humming to himself. A man who was dangerous would not risk light and smoke drawing attention. Yet here he was at ease, as though the forest belonged to him, and she was the intruder. Her grip tightened on the strap of her pack as her thoughts tangled. Was it possible she had followed the wrong trail? Was it possible that everything she believed about the danger ahead had been nothing more than echoes of her own fears? The firelight shimmered across his face again, revealing lines softened by fatigue and concentration, not the hard edges of someone plotting harm. He looked like a traveler, worn but deliberate, as if this clearing was a resting place he had chosen carefully. She remained hidden, still not daring to step closer. The man reached into the pot, lifted the ladle to his lips and blew gently before tasting. His eyes closed briefly, a small smile pulling at his mouth as though the flavor had met his expectation. The image was disarming, painfully human. It was not what she wanted to see, and yet she could not turn away. For the first time since the chase began, her breath slowed, her heart still beat heavy, but it was no longer the rhythm of fear alone. It was the rhythm of uncertainty, of a hunt that no longer made sense. The fire crackled on, the smell grew richer, and the man hummed quietly to himself, never once looking into the trees where she stood, watching, caught between stepping forward and vanishing back into the night. The air around her shifted as the scent grew stronger, wrapping itself around her like an invisible rope, pulling her closer even as her instinct screamed to stay hidden. The smell was not just food, it was memory. It carried the warmth of kitchens long gone, the echo of voices she had lost, and the comfort of nights when danger was only a story told to frighten children. She felt her stomach clench, not with hunger alone, but with a yearning she had not prepared to feel out here in the wild. Darkness, every breath she drew, carried more of it, rich and layered, earthy, with herbs smoky with the fire, something hearty that made her mouth water in betrayal. She wanted to hate it, to tell herself that it was nothing more than a trick, but the body does not lie, and her body ached for what the pot promised. She tightened her jaw, her hands curled tight against her sides, as though she could fight the pull with raw defiance. The man did not move quickly, he did not glance over his shoulder, he did not act like prey at all. His calm was disarming, like he had built this fire not to conceal but to invite. His humming continued, soft and tuneless, yet steady, and it filled the space between fire and trees like a thread weaving the moment together. The sound caught her off guard because she realized she had not heard another human voice in days, and the simple hum felt like a reminder that she was not alone. Her pulse still thundered, but it was different. Now, not the beat of chase and capture, but the restless rhythm of questions. Why was he here? Why had she believed she was following something dangerous? Why had every sound and shadow convinced her that harm waited ahead, when now she saw only a traveler tending to a meal? In peace she shifted her weight, and a twig snapped beneath her boot. The sound was sharp and cruel in the quiet, and her heart froze. She waited for him to startle, to leap to his feet, to reach for a weapon, but he only paused for the briefest moment. The ladle stilled in his hand, his head tilted slightly as if he had heard the forest breathe. Then he shrugged once, a small movement, easy and dismissive, and went back to stirring the pot. The ease of it unsettled her even more. It meant he either did not fear what was out there, or he knew exactly what was watching him and chose not to react. That thought sent a chill across her skin. Despite the firelight warming the clearing, he did not look toward her, yet somehow she felt as though he had already seen her, already measured her presence, and decided she was no threat. The fire cracked and popped, sending sparks spiraling into the dark. The smell deepened until it filled every part of her. She felt caught between hunger and caution, her body urging her to step into the light, her mind dragging her back into the safety of the shadows. Suspicion tangled with desire, and for the first time since she began the hunt, she realized she no longer knew what it was she wanted to find. She lingered in the shadows, her eyes fixed on the man who worked so calmly over the flames. The more she studied him, the less he resembled the threat she had imagined in her mind. His movements were deliberate but never sharp. His body language spoke of patience, not fear. There was no weapon at his side, no frantic glances into the trees, no sign that he was waiting to spring into violence. He looked instead like someone who had chosen this place not as a battlefield but as a home, even if only for a night. The fire painted his face in shifting tones, and she saw the lines of weariness etched there, not the hard lines of cruelty, but the softened traces of long journeys. His beard was rough, his clothes worn yet clean in their own way, a patch here, a stitch there, the marks of a man who repaired what he carried instead of discarding it. His hands moved with steady confidence as he tasted the broth, adjusted the pot, and reached into a small pack beside him for herbs that he sprinkled with care. The sight disarmed her more than any weapon could have. She tried to remind herself why she had come out here. She told herself again and again that the forest was not safe, that she had been warned of intruders, that danger could wear the face of anyone, yet each time she whispered the warning inside her mind, the scene before her unraveled it. He hummed softly, still lost in his own world, and she realized he was not hiding at all. He was not a fugitive running from shadows. He was simply existing here in a way that felt almost foreign to her because it was so unguarded. Her heart thudded against her ribs. Not with fear now, but with confusion and the weight of discovery. She had built her fear on the sounds she heard. The footsteps, the rustle of leaves, the breaking of branches. She had imagined a man dangerous and desperate, but the truth illuminated by the fire was a man who valued stillness more than speed and quiet more than confrontation. She wondered if she had mistaken her own echoes for his. If the forest had been feeding her dread and she had obeyed without question. The smell of the food wrapped around her again, and she felt the weakness of her hunger expose her further. Her guard wavered as she thought of how long it had been since she had tasted a meal prepared with such care. The broth hissed as he stirred and lifted steam into the air, steam that carried promises of warmth and comfort. He blew across the ladle and sipped, then gave a small nod to himself, satisfied, not proud, just steady and content. In that moment, she understood that she was not watching an enemy at all. She was watching a traveler, a wanderer, someone who had traded the crowded weight of cities for the wide silence of the forest. He had not come here to harm, he had come here to belong to the quiet, and in her hiding place, with suspicion fading, she realized she had been hunting not a criminal but a man who had built a fragile sanctuary out of fire, food, and solitude. Her grip on her pack finally loosened, as if the firelight itself had melted the tension from her hands. She stood in the trees, feeling the pull of two choices linger in her chest. The shadows whispered for her to turn back, to vanish, before the man noticed her, to carry her fear with her into the night, and let the mystery remain unsolved. But the glow ahead invited her forward. It offered warmth, food, and the possibility of seeing him not as a threat but as a person. The man adjusted the pot again, humming low under his breath. His song drifted into the branches and seemed to settle on her shoulders. The tune was simple yet steady, and in it she heard no malice, only comfort. He leaned back from the flames, stretched his arms, and looked up at the sky as though speaking with the stars themselves. His face carried none of the hardness she had prepared for. He looked like a man who had carried heavy burdens and set them down here, if only for a little while. The scent of the stew grew stronger with every passing moment. She felt her hunger gnawing at her with quiet insistence. The forest had offered her nothing but roots and dry berries, and the memory of fire-roasted food felt almost impossible. Yet there it was, simmering a few steps away. The sound of bubbling liquid seemed louder than the beating of her heart. The smell was so rich that she could almost taste it before her lips touched it. She wondered if he already knew she was there. The pause when the twig had cracked, the way his head had tilted, the calm that followed all of it suggested he was not ignorant of her presence. Perhaps he had chosen not to call out. Perhaps he had chosen instead to leave the decision with her. He had built a fire that invited light. Rather than chase it away, he had sung into the night. Instead of staying silent, he was waiting in his own way. Her body leaned forward without permission, as if drawn by the fire itself. Her boots shifted against the soil, and she stepped from the shadow into the edge of light. The flames reached for her with long golden fingers, touching her face and revealing her form. She felt the air shift. The song faltered for the first time. His eyes opened and turned toward her, calm, steady, not startled, not afraid. He simply watched, as though he had known all along. The silence that followed was heavy but not hostile. It was the silence of choices being weighed, of paths crossing that had not been planned. The fire crackled, the stew bubbled, and the night wrapped them both in its vast embrace. Her breath came slow, and she realized the hunt had ended, not with capture, not with struggle, but with the unexpected sight of a man offering a meal by a fire. She lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked back at him. The fear was gone, replaced by something she could not yet name. It was not trust, not yet, but it was no longer suspicion either. The forest around them seemed to fade, leaving only the circle of light where hunter and hunted no longer mattered, and in that fragile stillness she understood that what she had found was not danger but an invitation.